You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today. But before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to OklahomaHOF on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is Chouteau Nation. Now, the Chouteau Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chouteau Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Ryan, who is the Artistic Director at the Oklahoma City Ballet. Ryan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Now, I have like tiny kind of experience in ballet, thanks to Lastari, who's also in the room, has given me some opportunities to come and watch and see the performances and up close understand how athletic the dancers are and just have a more appreciation for the craft. My limited knowledge of ballet comes from the movie Billy Elliot back in the day. You know,
that's interesting.
If you've seen Billy Elliot,
that's right? What got me into dancing.
The huge movie in the UK, probably in the 90s, late 90s, yes. Right? So that's kind of like before seeing it live, that was my experience of the ballet. Mm-hmm. People probably listening are just cracking up at that. If you haven't seen that movie, go watch it. It's brilliant. But yeah, like it's not really, I think. And then I had friends who went to RAD in the Royal Academy of Dance in the UK, sure. Right? I had kind of friends, daughters who ended up going there, and that was like my limited knowledge of ballet until coming out here and seeing it and comes the the shows and stuff. So excited to dive into it, but as we do on the show, before we do dive into the ballet scene in Oklahoma City, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in central Maine. Okay. So I always tell people I'm kind of 20 minutes from the ocean and 20 minutes from the mountains. So it was a really great place to grow up, a very outdoorsy place to be. And it's sort of country, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You miss seafood? Good seafood?
I love good seafood. The only difference I noticed really, except for the lobster, there's a big difference between lobster in Oklahoma and lobster in Maine. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest difference is just the price. If you go to any restaurant in Oklahoma City and order a Maine lobster, you're going to pay well over $30 for it. And you can get lobster in Maine for $7.
Yeah. That's awesome. I haven't been, but I've heard it's great, and I don't mind seafood here and there. So you grew up in Maine, a little bit of country, kind of mountains, and obviously the sea as well. What's other than like you said, watching Billy Elliot getting you into ballet. Before that happens, what is your childhood like? Are you into athletics? Are you from a big family? Tell me about, take us to that time in your life.
I'm from a really big family. I believe I'm the oldest of my grandmother's 30-something grandchildren.
Yeah.
So holidays were always a big, important thing. And the interesting thing is that the entire family lives within 25 miles of each other, which I suppose is kind of, I guess I sort of took that for granted when I moved away to ballet school, and all of my friends were like, well, I have family over here, and they're spread out all over the country.
Yeah.
Mine was always really close. So me leaving to go to ballet school and subsequently become a dancer and travel was sort of a big deal, because it meant I wasn't, attending those large family gatherings and things.
Yeah, other cultures that's normal to them, right? Like other cultures across the world, right? Family gatherings is something that they do at least once a week, or it's
and once a year we have family reunions, and Thanksgiving and Christmas at my grandmother's house always was really huge. And I grew up camping and hunting with my grandfather, and he lived on a lot of land, and so I spent a lot of time as a child. We didn't have electronics in the late 80s and 90s. So I spent a lot of time outside, in getting dirty in the woods, hurting myself, playing in the stream, and
Kids don't do that today.
No.
Right? They're missing out on that.
Yes.
Right? Our mum used to tell me, go out and play with your friends and come home when the street lights come on. Right?
Right.
Because that's when it's getting dark. That's like your ticking clock. I'm like, okay, now you got to come home.
My best friend and I, who I spent a lot of time at his house, especially on the weekends, and we would grab our skateboards in the morning, a gallon of water, our backpacks, and we would leave after a quick breakfast, and we would not come back until dinner time.
Yeah.
And the only way to communicate with your family at that, when you're out, was a payphone. So we had to make sure that we had some change, just in case something did happen, we could figure it out.
Yeah. How old are you when you left to go to ballet school?
I moved away to Winnipeg, Manitoba when I was 17. So my junior year of high school.
Yeah. Leading up to that, are you in a bunch of sports growing up? Like, what's your earliest and then, adding on to that, what is the earliest that you decide to dive into the performing arts world?
Well, I grew up playing Little League and PAL football. I played football all through junior high and high school. And coming from a small town like that, football's, relatively a big deal, almost to the point where it's not fun. It's so competitive. But I was talked into taking a ballet class one day. And I went with a bunch of other guys, football players, and some of them relatives. And we were just doing this thing, and the local newspaper was doing an article about how football and ballet, and and so I took this one class, and somehow I was convinced to go back for another class and another class, and before I knew it, I was very much like Billy Elliot, where I was, hiding the football cleats or hiding the ballet shoes under my bed. I didn't really tell anybody that I continued to go to ballet class. And I remember the first ballet that I was cast in was Nutcracker, and I had actually quit because as people started to find out that I was dancing, you can imagine in a small town like that, I was getting teased, and I didn't like that very much. I had a scrap in the football locker room one day, and I was like, forget this. I'm not doing ballet anymore. I'm going to lose all my friends. So I quit, and I stopped dancing for about a month and a half. And I realized that I felt sort of empty without it. I'd found this thing that filled a void I didn't even know I had. This artistic nature inside me that I could express myself. But also it was the work. The work was so incredibly challenging, and I could never go in on a given day. No matter how much I improved, I would never ever go in and hit the top. And something about that excited me, so I went back and made a choice. And I remember the day that I determined, or at least that I learned that ballet could be a job, because I didn't know that. I thought it was recreational, and I asked this older guy who was in town for a summer intensive. His name was Joseph, and I said, so I realized that somebody can be a professional dancer. Do you think I could do that? And he said, no. No way, it's too late. You have to go through all of this training, and he came from a big school, and luckily for me, I was blessed, and I had a lot of people supporting me. And so I got some opportunities that I think were unlikely.
Yeah. How old were you when you had that conversation?
Gosh, I must have been 16 probably.
Okay.
Right at the tail end of 16.
Because most kids grow up in the art, they're in there since they can walk, right? Like, I understand why he said, no, it's too late. It's like, there's not many people who get to the top of their craft and become, doing their passion, which is generally in sports, as a career if they start, 15, 16, right?
Yeah, I think for boys, at least at that time, it was a bit different. You could start a bit later, because I guess the idea was, and maybe why they were interested in me, I was just strong from the football and the athletics. So if I could pick up a dancer that was wearing pointe shoes and look somewhat put together behind them, that was really all I needed to move forward. At least that's what I thought. And then I got schooled when I joined a professional training program and realized all of these boys had been doing it since they were 12, had their legs up past their ears and this beautiful technique, and I was really behind. I had this old Romanian teacher named Mr. Petru, and he used to always come up. He sort of sounded like Dracula a little bit, but he would always come up to me at the bar, and I would have this like grimace on my face, and he said, "Don't get mad, Ryan. It's okay. Put your leg on the low bar." And I just kept plugging away at it.
Yeah. Back to that initial class with all the football players, a good friend of mine who was retired now but was a professional soccer player, his mum is a ballet teacher and still teaches ballet today, and she had him in class because it helped with his football, soccer for Americans listening. But another friend of mine too, who was a golfer, like it's amazing how much it really helps development across all sports rather than just specific to performing in ballet. So.
It does. And one thing I remember pretty distinctly is that when we would practice in the cold, because your football season's in the fall, and I remember often I would take and mind you, I'm very young, so I probably was too young to have knee pain. But I would take a 3-point stance, and I would feel like my knees just were like I had this horrible arthritis. And I remember once I started dancing, that pain completely went away. I developed a flexibility and also a functionality within my body that a lot of the aches and pains kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
Well, and then I developed new ones.
yeah, right. And it's inevitable at some point. You keep doing something and you get into something new, you're going to, even you just go down to stretching, right? Like the amount of stretching you guys have to do and maintain doing, because it's easily, sadly, flexibility is lost. You take a week off or 2 weeks off and I feel it already.
It is. And I'll be honest with you, I was not naturally flexible. I was in fact, the opposite of flexible. And I remember I had this Russian teacher, and she had me on the floor in sort of this turned out frog position. And, my butt is way up in the air and my feet are off the air, and it's very clear I have no turnout. And so she has one of the students sit on my butt and another student step on my feet, and I'm 16 years old in tears. She had by that time I was pretty fully grown, and I was in tears on the floor, and she's just laughing at me. You can't get away with that nowadays. But it helped. I remember in Winnipeg, I lived in the dormitory with my cousin, and we shared a dorm. And the dormitory is in the ballet school. And they told me that my shoulders were too broad. So somehow we had taken a pool stick from the recreation room, and I had tied it to my shoulders, and so that it would help. And then I laid on my bed and put my legs up against the wall and fell asleep in a split. I was like, I'm just going to lay here until I can do a split. And finally, when I woke up, I couldn't I couldn't close my legs. So I had to wait for somebody to come in and help me, move my legs to a position where I could stand. And then, of course, I had to phone my teacher and tell them I could not partake in class for the next 2 days because I had stretched myself to being paralyzed.
Right. Basically disabled. So
I could not walk.
out.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So you said your cousin was in ballet school with you.
Mm-hmm.
So did you have someone before you know, when you go back to being 16, 17, before you go, is that the person you kind of like in the family that was a part of,
Mm-hmm.
you know, not you weren't just the first one?
Yes, he was younger than me. He started when he was 12. But really it was his mother who was a really important figure in my life too, that got me into dance, and the one who kept telling me, whether she was lying or not, I don't know, kept telling me I had talent and I should keep going, and they really liked me and they wanted me in the shows, and it sort of boosted me up enough to. She helped get me into Winnipeg, and she moved me across the country and actually into Canada. Yeah. And I lived with her, and for some of the time I stayed in the dorm with Jon Stewart some of the time. So yeah.
I mean, I understand kind of what it's like going to a completely new country, but personally for you, what were those experiences traveling at 17 years old, going to Winnipeg? Like, you know, you're leaving behind kind of like probably what you've grown up around, athletics, sports, guys, teams, you know, being in that kind of camaraderie, and then you're going into something that people from the outside would look at as completely alien, right, and different. You have, you know, the kind of comfort around it being that you know your cousin, you know you've got family that are helping you out, but you're still young, right? And you're still going to Canada, and you're still going to pursue, you know, this new passion of yours that's been only a passion for maybe 4 or 5 years, right? So how was that as a, you know, going across to Canada with the experiences, with just the nerves going, you know, like, am I doing the right thing? Like all the things that go through our heads when we're a young, you know, adult.
Yeah, I think the moving experience for me was exciting. My personality, I don't know if it's because I'm a Sagittarius, but I love to travel. I love to meet new people and immerse myself into cultures. And but I think the thing that really helped keep me focused and keep me involved in wanting to come back was, aside from just the art form and my passion for that, was the close friendship that you develop with other like-minded people. So when you're doing something that is that demanding and that nuanced, and you're surrounded in a live-in situation with other people who are going for the same goal, you develop a friendship that is not the same as you do in sort of a public high school setting, right? And I felt a closeness and a support and kind of a family atmosphere in this school, and that was something I did not want to let go of. I think a lot of dancers attach to those relationships, and that keeps them going forward.
That's really special, right? Because I think a lot of people who leave traditional, like what everybody would say, that scene, right, of quote the locker room scene or in your team, or I think that's probably why people love CrossFit, because you guys get to work out all the time. You know, I never got that with golf because it was a personal sport. Probably the same with tennis and other personal sports. So you miss that, or when you leave college, or you miss that stuff, and people are kind of craving for it now. But you know, you look at all the rooms out here, people are having this experience in this building today that you just experienced, you know, that you just described. What was the reason to go to Winnipeg versus any other school? And then when you go there, are you studying, you know, like a quote normal university, or are you just doing dance?
Well, the reason to go there was just because they took me.
Okay.
It never crossed my mind to join a professional training school. I already was at a boarding school, but it was a local boarding school in Maine, and they happened to have a Russian teacher. So a part of my high school curriculum was taking ballet class for 2 blocks out of the day. But again, my aunt and my cousin's mother had said, you know, Jon Stewart's in Winnipeg. I bet you could get in. We should audition for the summer program. So I remember she drove me to Fredericton, New Brunswick, which is just pretty much north of where I lived. And we did a summer intensive audition. So this is in, let's say, November, early December. I go do this audition, and it's for the summer intensive that's going to happen the following June. And it's a 5-week summer intensive. You go, you live there, and that was the goal. Well, we got there, and when you do summer intensive auditions for a school like that, they also are considering you for the possibility of a year-round program. And so I got there, and after class, they spoke to me. And they said, we're happy to take you for the summer. We would love to take you for the year-round program, but because of your age, if we wait until June for you to do the summer intensive, and then all the way into the fall, and that's your first year, and you're going to be mid 17 years old, and you'll have 1 year of school, there's not much we can do with you at that point. So what we'd like to do is have you join us in January. So when I went home, I had 2 weeks for my family to make the decision if I was going to pick up everything I own and move to Canada. And that was a kind of a daunting thing. It was sort of a whirlwind. My dad, I don't mean to keep referencing Billy Elliot, but it was similar to that. He didn't understand it. And so there was pushback. He was saying, no, I want my son to grow up at home. And my mother knew that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And one night she packed my bags and she said, I'm making an executive decision, you're going. And so I got in the car, drove to Montreal, hopped on a plane, started my new life pretty quickly.
Yeah. Wow, right? Like to go through that and to have the conversation with your parents and then have that back and forth, and then mum just be like, look, this is good for you, you're going. Mm-hmm. Worst case scenario, you can always come home after if it doesn't work out. Right. Like,
and my dad was pretty upset, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But he eventually came around. It's sort of like, I guess I had all these careers that I was going to accomplish when I was a kid. I would tell them, I'm going to be a rock star. I played guitar since I was little. I'm going to be a rock star. Oh, sure. Yeah, you can do anything you want. I'm going to be a professional skateboarder. Yeah, sure, you can do that too. I think I'm going to play football. Okay. And so it just sort of was like they just let me say it. And then when I said I think I'm going to be a professional ballet dancer, that was even more foreign to them than the idea of me becoming a rock star. So he wasn't buying it. Right. And then I remember he saw me dance in the first time he saw me dance after some real training, and the pride I think that he felt, and it sort of all came together. And he was like, I guess what we want for our children as parents is for them to grow up and have opportunities more than what we had, mm-hmm. to have them be better than we were. Mm-hmm. And I think that was sort of a light bulb moment for him.
So you end up, you're rushed out there, you make all these decisions, you get out there to Winnipeg, you're in school, you're going through, you realize like what this is as a profession. You've got these teachers who are around, and you're trying to catch up with kids who've been in this since they could walk. How was it? How was that experience?
It was scary. I mean, I walked into that class and it's like I had a teacher once who would compare like dancers to like different cars. Right, like this dancer is like a Ford truck. They can just bulldoze through anything. This person is, it's like a Ferrari. It's just lean and fast and built for speed. And I was sort of like a Mazda 626 in a class with a bunch of Ferraris, trying to race to the top. And it just there were things that I was not going to catch up with. And I remember they do this program called First Steps, and it's a choreographic showcase so the dancers can choreograph on each other. And in a school like that, you have pedigrees of students, and some of the students at the top are sort of nurtured through the school with the expectation that they will become something that will represent the school well. I was new. I came in halfway through the year, didn't know anybody. They had already established all these friendships. I was thrown into a piece, and there was this girl and these two older students, these two level 7 students, Grace and James, that were dancing the lead role in this piece. And I was just an understudy. I think they just wanted to keep me busy. But James had broken his foot, and they were discussing whether or not they were going to pull the piece. And one day they threw me in to learn the pas de deux and dance with Grace. And I just was doing it in the background. And the artistic staff said, no way, not a chance. We don't trust him. If he breaks her, he's out. We're not doing it. Like she was their prized possession. Yeah. And one day I was down in Studio 116, which is kind of their big studio. And the doors have these little mirrors in the windows. And I guess one of the faculty, actually Jordan, who was the choreographer of Peter Pan, was watching through the door, and he came in and he said, do it again. And so we ran the pas de deux. And he kind of looked at me and he got up and he gave me some notes about some pirouettes. And I fixed them. And then he said, you guys keep going, I'll be right back. And he came back with the rest of the artistic staff. And they made me run the pas de deux again. And I think it was my partnering that saved the day, because they cast me in that part and I did the lead role in this sort of a Sinatra kind of ballet. And that was kind of my first experience on stage with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet School. I got tossed into this thing and it was just luck.
Take me through those emotions when you're on stage. How's it? Do you remember it?
I was nervous.
Yeah.
But I think something happens when you're an artist, something happens when you're on stage. And I feel nerves in the wings. I feel nerves before I walk out on stage. But when you're out there and the music is going, first of all, you don't have a choice. You can't say, sorry, I can't do this. I'll see you. You got to get through it. But the best way to get through it is to just completely immerse yourself in what you're doing. And I think that's the beautiful thing about art form, is for however long you are moving to this music, however long you're with somebody else on stage with this connection and making this art, you can sort of disappear, you know? You become something that is so different than who you are in regular life. So I think being on stage for me, and even in that moment, I was green, but I just sort of lived there.
Yeah. Do things then significantly progress from you getting that chance to be on stage and people start giving you bigger opportunities because they know they can trust you and they understand that you can perform as well?
Yeah, I think, I had physical limitations. My feet weren't great. Like I said, I wasn't flexible, but I think I had a certain element to performance quality that the audience enjoyed. And I always tell people that I was kind of the person that was dancing the lead roles, even though I wasn't really ever on the poster. I wasn't the poster child with the beautiful feet, but I was the person on stage because I could get it done.
Yeah.
And we had a saying for that in Kansas City Ballet, that those kinds of dancers are like Clydesdales. They're sturdy and they can do anything in the work and just kind of pull it through. And the joke was that very few people are thoroughbreds and are just bred to do it.
Yeah. Where does it go from there? How long are you in Winnipeg, and then where do you go after that?
I was there for 2.5 years. I graduated. They give you a diploma, and not everybody gets that. So I felt really blessed to see my work pay off in that way. As a level 7 student, I got to perform a soloist role with the company. I didn't ultimately get chosen for the company. There's a lot of dancers and very few spots. But my graduation year, I did the Banff Summer Arts Festival, which was amazing. It's 6 weeks in the mountains in Banff. And if you've ever seen that part of the country, it is just gorgeous. You're right on the middle of the mountain by the lake. And you just dance for 6 weeks with people from all over North America. And so that was my first real professional experience because we were paid a bit to do it. And I came back and my first job was in Providence, Rhode Island. I wanted to be home, closer to family. I'd been away for so long. So I danced in Providence for a year. And then I moved to Boise, Idaho to dance with Eugene Ballet. And that's where I think I spent a large part of my career. I stayed there for a while.
Yeah.
Dancers kind of bounce from company to company for various reasons. I think whether they like the city or if they find a safe space with the artistic director and they sort of align with the vision, or they need more growth if they sort of reach the top in the company they're in. So I moved around for a little bit.
Yeah. And you're living your dream at this point, right? This is exactly what you want to do. This is the career that you chose. And you go back to that conversation you had with Joseph, right? When you're 16, like, like kind of like, not like I told you so, but it's a validating thing to look back and be like, no, I've done it. And it's not easy to do. And I've, gone through all the emotions and traveled around the world. And, you're doing this as a career, which probably a lot of people don't think about, right? People don't think that everyone, people in this building or people they see on stage, like some of them are career dancers, like they do this for a living versus having a job and this is just like a workout and a passion that they've done just to stay fit.
Right. So the dancers that we have in Oklahoma City Ballet and in a lot of major companies, right? There are pickup companies that require you to have another job, but with our organization and all of the ones that I worked for, it's a full-time job. It's 9 to 5, 5 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week if you're in performance weeks. Some of the more reputable companies have healthcare and 401k plans and dental plans for the dancers, and we have a matching program with our 401k, and so these dancers, this is really a career for them, and it's a short career, which is a whole other conversation that can be very scary. But yeah, it really is. It's not just a lifestyle, I think. But what makes it special is it is something that we would do for free. I tell people that I would have danced even if I didn't get a paycheck. That's the passion part of it. The other part is that you have to live.
Yeah. Does it, to the point of just that some of the organizations have, like you just said, kind of 401k plans and then a bigger, organizations, is that just based on the location, the donor base, the passion for it in specific cities? Like what is then like the determining factors and what makes Oklahoma City kind of one of those special places?
Well, I think there are a lot of factors that come into play. First and foremost, I think the community and the support that the community offers to the arts. There are some, big cities where ballet companies just can't thrive because there's another industry there that sort of overtakes that. We're very lucky in Oklahoma, and that's one of the things that drew me to the company, was the tremendous support that Oklahoma City has for the arts and for Oklahoma City Ballet. I would say another aspect is leadership. The vision of leadership and how they cultivate and nurture the company and move it forward. There are some artistic directors that can take a company from being fairly unknown to becoming a world-class organization in their tenure. And some where it just sort of floats. Your ability to get talent. If you live in a city that dancers want to move to that city and live there and make that a part of their life and how they spend their journey. So there's a lot of aspects, but Oklahoma City is special because I think the community really has a lot of support for the artists, but perhaps more importantly is that we have artists that are here in this company that are very special, and dancing for a company that people might not expect would perform at the level that we do. We had the opportunity to perform in Chicago last season. Gerald Arpino is one of the founders of the Joffrey Ballet. They were doing a centennial festival, and Oklahoma City Ballet was invited, through the efforts of the previous artistic director, was invited to Chicago to perform in this centennial festival, one of his most famous ballets, Birthday Variations. And we opened the entire festival. And we were on stage with Ballet West, American Ballet Theater, San Francisco Ballet, Joffrey Ballet, these major companies. And we opened the festival, and the entire weekend, the talk of the festival was Oklahoma City Ballet, and how it just sort of came out of nowhere. Who is this company, and how did we not know about them? The dancers are fire, and I think that really elevated them too. It was really nice for them to hear that and feel that level of success, because you can imagine the nerves that they had dancing next to some of these superstars.
Yeah, and it's experiences like those that kind of, if you're in your bubble and you're only in Oklahoma City, or you've just been a kind of quote, everyone says Oklahoma City is a small market for sports and other things, right? But when you take them to a big stage like that, and then they get that validation of, whoa, like, when you're in your bubble, you just think that you're good at, what you do. But when you're getting outside kind of admiration, you're like, oh, like that's kind of when it really hits you, right? Because you're so day to day, you're here sometimes 7 days a week, you're doing your craft, and until you get those moments for the dancers, Oh, that makes us feel really, really good, right? Because it's not easy, and I'm sure there's times where you're teaching, or people are coaching, or you mentioned some of the coaches you've had in the past and teachers you had, like some of them Russians aren't nice people, right? Meaning that like they are nice people.
They
but
don't
they
mince
don't
words. They don't mince words.
They don't throw out compliments very often in general, right? Like I had a few Russian tennis players in college, and we used to joke that like they just don't smile, even when they win. So, but it's just part of the world that they grow up in. So it's nice to hear that you get that validation from across the world on the stage, across the country on a stage that's you've got some of the best in the nation there, or the best in the nation there, and you go out and the kind of ripples are like, oh my gosh, the whispers are Oklahoma City Ballet, and you're like, wait a second, we're part of that.
Well, and you always wonder, how do you fare outside of your vacuum? Outside of your bubble? How do you compare to other organizations? I mean, we see other performances, but what do they think about us? They don't see us. So getting us out of that vacuum and dancing in front of the rest of the country and for an audience, mind you, this wasn't an audience of just community patrons that showed up to see a ballet performance. This was an audience from all over the country that was versed in this art form. They knew what was good and what was not good. I will never forget the moment, and these are the most rewarding things about my job. I will never forget the moment. The curtain goes, the lights go off at the end of the piece, and before they come back on and the dancers take their space to bow, the whole auditorium is black, right? And there's silence for a split second. And I stood up, and I like to believe that I was the first person clapping. I had tears in my eyes. When the lights came on, the entire sold-out auditorium was on their feet screaming for these dancers, and that was a remarkable feeling. And as hard as this job is, it's moments like that, those little moments of reassurance that you're doing something right, those moments stick with you, and they keep you waking up in the morning and pushing through the hard stuff,
Yeah, it's sometimes you wish you could just like bottle that up, right, and just take a sip of it every day, and just remember that, just to when you're getting up in the morning, your feet hurt, it's hard, and you're on, you're grinding or getting used to getting ready for a show, whatever it is. Like, it's those moments, like you just said, that keep you going. And fortunately, there's people that go through their life and don't have those moments, sadly. But you guys have had, I'm sure, multiple of those moments. And it's stuff that, everyone's different. Everyone kind of holds on to different things that they might deem as personal successes. But you got to find your fuel somewhere.
Well, and when I think about how difficult my job is, it's just different than being a dancer. Because you can't take anything away from how difficult a dancer's career is. It is short. It is saturated. It's very hard to get a job and make a career for yourself. And there are so many factors. And a lot of it has to do with luck. Some of it has to do with, is the artistic director just excited about you or not? Maybe nothing you did wrong. And a lot of it doesn't seem fair. And a dancer's journey is like a roller coaster, because every 2 months when casting comes out for the next ballet, your emotional stability hangs on what that paper's going to say. And that's not lost on me. And I think that the most challenging part that I find about this job is wanting to fulfill every dancer in my organization, every dancer's dreams. I do want that, whether dancers believe their artistic director or not. I do want that, but it's not always possible, and you have to make choices, and you have to try to do what you think is best with all of the information that you have. But it is hard for them. This career is very hard. Yeah. The thing that I think makes it rewarding in a sense, in one way, is that at the end of the day, after all of these laborious rehearsals and the blood, sweat, and tears, at the end of the day, there's an audience standing up telling you did a really great job. And that, not a lot of people get that experience. You don't have somebody patting you on the back or applauding for you every time you do your job.
Yeah, right. And I think Oklahoma City's blessed to have such a great venue as well. That's one thing I noticed when I walk in. I'm like, regardless of who's on stage, like, this place is awesome, right? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people in here, and it's just, the sound's great, it's built great, and it's like, you know, and got to experience it with like 20 people in there and then a full room. It's like, doesn't matter. This place is like, what a place to play in front of and perform on stage at. So I'm sure others, you know, like the musicians probably feel the same way as the dancers, right? Like it's just a great spot.
It is. It is really. We have a world-class situation here, and my goal is to bring the ballets that will feed the community. Also, I have to think about ticket sales, but will feed the community, but ballets that really feed the dancers, because I think the work that we put up on the stage isn't just, you know, something to give to the audience and then we move on to the next. The process that the dancers go through from start to finish when we close that program is what helps them grow. And that's how I see sort of feeding them and in their training and their development, so that we continue to kind of raise the ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Before we dive in more into your role here and just the scene here, tell me, finish up like your career. Where do you finish up? Why do you make the decision to finish up? And then how do you make the decision to eventually come to Oklahoma City and get into the position that you're in now versus going into a different role in the quote business world outside of performing arts?
I moved to Kansas City Ballet. I was, I think, 24 years old, still dancing in Boise, and I'd become a principal dancer. And I started to think to myself, maybe if I'm this young and I'm already at the top of the company, you know, how much growth will I continue to have here if I have 10 more years of my career? So maybe I could go to a bigger company and dance in the back for a while, and I would be okay with that if it meant that I was going to continue to grow. So I auditioned for Kansas City Ballet, and I remember, this is rough for a dancer because I think I spent $700 on a plane ticket. Nowhere is easy to get to from Boise, Idaho. I spent $700 on a plane ticket. I went to this audition. They invited me to company class. And again, it was like that first day in Winnipeg. I was in a class with people who were, in my eyes, in my impression, leagues ahead of me. I didn't stand a chance. And the class was hard. I didn't dance well. You have all of these nerves, so your muscles sort of tighten up. And I remember just praying to God they saw something other than my feet in that class. And so we left the class, and I went into the meeting with the artistic director. They spoke to me after class, and it was the artistic director and the ballet mistress. And they said, we'll be honest with you. I remember Karen, one of my favorite ballet mistresses, but she was not easy on me. And it started that day with that audition. She said, I'll be honest with you, there are some limitations, Mr. Nye. If we do take you for a contract, we got a lot of work to do. You're behind. And I was like, okay, thank you. And so I was under the impression that there was not a chance I was going to get this job. And I thought, if I'm going to take the opportunity to sell myself and get this job, it is right now. So I said, I recognize that there are shortcomings in my technique, that maybe I'm a bit behind the aesthetic of what you're used to. But what I can tell you is that I will be the hardest worker in the room. I will take every correction and I will apply it. And I will work, and I will be a leader, and I will be graceful, and I will be everything that you hope for in an employee and also an artist. I can tell you that I don't take anything in this career lightly, and this is where I want to be. And if you give me a chance, I really don't think you'll be disappointed. I hope you won't. And I got up to leave, and Bill, who was the director at the time, he stopped me and he turned around and he said, do you know why we invited you to this audition? And I said, no. He said, you did a piece on your audition video, this pas de deux. And it was actually a pas de deux that I had choreographed. And it seemed like you had something on the stage that we don't see in class. And I just thought you should know that. And I said, well, thank you. And he said, we'll call you if we have anything. So I left, and I got in the car, and I was like, I don't even have $700. I spent like my rent on this, and it was a waste of time. Again, going back to Billy Elliot, he had that first audition, remember? And he walks out, and he was says some choice words and throws his shoes down. It was a waste of time and a waste of money. And I felt so much frustration. So I just went to see a movie. And I was in the theater, and my phone starts to ring, and it's Bill, the artistic director, the same day, just a couple hours later. And he calls, and I don't even remember what he asked me, but he had one more question. And I said, yeah, sure. Whatever it was, I sort of answered his question, and then we hung up. And time went by, and I had to sign my contract in Boise. And so you never want to call a company that you auditioned for and bug them. It doesn't, and I can tell you as an artistic director, it's not cute. It's not like, when we're so busy, when the time comes, we will tell you if we have a job. Now, if you're rushed, in my situation, you have to sign a contract, but you really want to be somewhere, it's okay to send an email. And so I called, and I said, I got to know, I have to sign this contract, but and the Kevin Amy, who was the company manager at the time, or general manager, he said, yeah, we already hired you. Bill didn't tell you? And I was like, no. He said, yeah, we decided on that 2 weeks ago. And I said, well, that's good news. So they sent me a contract, and I went to Kansas City. And my first few months was miserable. They just beat that ballet mistress was tough. And I had dancers apologizing to me. I don't know why she's picking you, but man, does she have it out for you. And I just felt like maybe I made the wrong choice. And we got to the first performance, and I went on stage, and I got in front of an audience, and I did what I do when I'm in front of an audience. And then Nutcracker casting came out, and all of a sudden I was doing soloist roles, and then principal roles. And I rose through the ranks, and I wasn't dancing in the back. I retired in 2016 from an injury. I had a pretty major surgery, so I was pretty young. And I moved into choreography and realized that I liked to make things on bodies that didn't have the same limitations that I had. And being in the front of the room was really nice, because I felt like I could impart my passion on these other artists, and I knew what it felt like to be inspired, and I wanted to inspire.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of how I transitioned into switching sides of the room, I guess.
Finishing up the kind of rounding out you as a performer, was there anything you did specifically, just you did that, from the context of like, I'm a golfer, most people in the golf world won't tell you this, but we're all really superstitious. We all do stupid things, with like, I have one ball marker that I use, like just little things like that. Mm-hmm. Is there anything kind of inside stuff for you that you would just do every time, or a certain way you'd put your shoes on, just to kind of something, a process that you had to do before you went on stage?
Always before shows, I would turn on videos of dancers that were famous, superstar dancers that were amazing. And I would watch these dancers on stage. I would watch the charisma and the technique and the execution. And in that, I would just try to have this sense of mindfulness that I was the same, that I was like that, so that when I went on stage, I believed that I was the best thing that this audience was going to see. And that removed all of my inhibitions, everything that I was worried about. And that was sort of my ritual.
Yeah.
I just had to psych myself up.
Yeah, everyone's different, right? Everyone has little things, but that's the first time I've heard someone say that they watched, the legends of their industry before they go on. It makes a lot of sense. And as long as it works for you, it works, right? Mm-hmm. So you go into the choreograph side, you're still at Kansas City. Is that what brings you to Oklahoma City? You come in as to choreograph as that role, or is it something else?
In Kansas City, I took a year off, and I started a private dinner chef business, and I sort of made fancy dinners for rich board members, these big 5-course meals. I did that for a little bit.
Where does your passion for cooking come from?
My grandmother.
Okay.
Yeah, those big family holidays.
Yeah.
I learned pretty early on that food and the dinner table, is where bonding happens. That's where joy happens in life. And so I've always loved to cook. And I would choreograph on the side, and that's really a hustle. Being a freelancer is a hustle. But Kansas City Ballet called, and an opening came up for their second company manager position, and they asked me if I would do it. So I went back to Kansas City Ballet and managed the studio company. And I had so much respect for the artistic director and for that organization. It had really become home for me, and it was like a family, so it was nice to be back there. But then I was offered a job to sort of build the company kind of from the ground up in Northwest Arkansas. And this is a region that is heavily influenced by the Walton family. And they really have a passion for the arts, and they have a passion for the region and developing the community to be a really thriving place to live. And that felt exciting. I went there with no promise of a paycheck. In fact, they were like, you do something, and if we like it, then we'll give you some money to. So try creating a ballet company with $0 and trying to get dancers to come there and dance for you for free
in Northwest Arkansas.
It just seemed impossible.
Right.
But I'm a little bit adventurous in that sense, so I did it, and it was thriving. But the previous artistic director here, Robert, he called and offered me a rehearsal director job, and that's sort of the supporting role for the artistic director. We run the rehearsals and clean the company and teach the classes, and so I did that for him, and then there was a transition, and I became the interim artistic director, and I was very blessed to step into the role as full-time artistic director. I have a lot of respect for this organization, a lot of respect for what Robert did to build the organization, and he really built it from the ground up. It was already building this name that was nationally recognized before I started. And so it's just been a really special experience, and came with different challenges than Arkansas. When you're building something from the very beginning, you build it how you want it. When you're walking into an organization that's already been built, then there's change management that has to happen, right? You have to try to figure out where are the holes, where are the gaps, what are problems that need to be fixed, how do we grow? And that sort of is its own challenge, I suppose.
When did you come here? What year?
I guess 2021.
Okay.
2020.
Yeah.
2020.
Great year to be thrown in.
Gosh, I don't even remember. Yeah, so I sold my house, and we sold our house in Overland Park right in the middle of lockdown. Mm-hmm. We got like 30 offers in the first day.
Yeah.
But then, consequently, it was difficult to buy a house here.
Yeah, right. You're seeing both sides of it. The real estate market during that time was insane. So you come to Oklahoma City, which really probably isn't that much of a change from Northwest Arkansas, coming down this way a little bit. Mm-hmm. But obviously, you've no doubt heard of Oklahoma City Ballet, and you come here and you work with Robert. For people who don't understand just the structure and the business of this place, right? There's classrooms, there's people coming in and out. It's not just the 1% athletes on top that you see on stage. Like, this place is, as we're recording now in one of the rooms, like, this place is busy. There's stuff going on all the time. Mm-hmm. So could you educate just people listening on just what the wider business is, that isn't just the on stage that we see, performing? Well,
it's sort of three businesses in one. We like to say we have sort of this three-legged stool, right? We have our professional performing company, and these are 28 employed professional artists. And we also have our Yvonne Chouteau school, which is a school that serves the community, but also national and international students. So we have sort of kind of two tracks. We have a track for dancers that are wanting to become professionals and put in the amount of hours per week and really hone in on that training. And we also have kind of a community track where people are here to dance and have fun and grow, and, like we talked about, build the relationships with other people that are dancing. And we have our community engagement also is the third part, and that is just kind of our outreach, how we serve the community and make sure that we're an accessible organization, and we're offering dance classes to the whole spectrum of people that are reflected in our community. We have a Parkinson's dance program that's fairly robust. We have our Golden Swans program, and this is for dancers that once were dancers. They talk about being lost and then found, right? They find themselves back in the ballet studio taking class with dancers that maybe they danced in the 70s. And then our outreach, where we go to public schools and Boys and Girls Club and things like that. So it really is 3 organizations operating almost different business models with the same mission, and that is to bring world-class art, world-class dance to this community and beyond.
Yeah. Outside of the business and your career, what do you love most about Oklahoma City? You've been here long enough to see and taste this amazing city now that our food is incredible and it's grown tremendously. Outside of work, what do you do for fun when you have time?
Well, I have to say my favorite thing about Oklahoma City is the ballet. But I'm biased. I really love the people. I love the people. I love how welcoming they were, that the community really made it feel like home very fast. They were excited about us being here, and we were excited to be here. I love how fast it's growing. It's an exciting time to be in Oklahoma City because the vibrancy is just growing exponentially, and being a part of that, moving and shaking and developing is really exciting, and I love to be in the mix. In my spare time, which I don't have a lot of, I do like to visit restaurants and take a riverboat cruise or see live music or go see a Thunder game. You can't live in Oklahoma City and not be a Thunder fan, which is hard for me because I'm a Celtics fan from being a child. So I see there being, some challenges coming up here this season.
It's a good problem to have, though, right? When you're in a small market like Oklahoma City, it's very easy to get tickets versus going to, Boston, New York, or wherever it is, LA.
I don't want to say I'm a good luck charm, but when I was living in Kansas City, the Chiefs really kind of, and then the Royals won the World Series, the Chiefs won how many Super Bowls, and even Sporting KC took home the World Cup. So
so you're staying until we win.
I'm just thinking, the ironic thing is that when I lived in Boise, and I don't talk about this, and maybe I don't want to say it on this podcast, but I lived in Boise in 2007, and there's the infamous 2007 Fiesta Bowl with OU and Boise State. And that was a rough game for.
I'm an Oklahoma State fan, so you can say that as much as you can. We can really dive into that one if you have play-by-plays and how you really celebrate.
I want to keep my job. So.
When was the last time you cooked for a big group?
Our premiere of the Nutcracker, we had all of the designers and all of the builders, and I made some food for them. We auction off something at our ballet ball where I will come to somebody's home and for 8 to 10 people do sort of these meals. And I was a sushi chef for about 6 years in Kansas City.
Wow.
And so I have that skill set. And so we started auctioning this sushi dinner, and so I've done a few of those.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun. I love to do it, and I love to see how people just sit around the table and have celebrate community.
Yeah, I have to keep my mind on that one. I'm in for some sushi, especially if it's being made by yourself and from the background that you have. Finishing up, I would love to dive into what you mentioned, kind of cooking for the guys who cook, make set design. Like I got to see the Nutcracker and the set design. I was just like, wow, like it's not just thrown together, right? Like it looks incredible. And so would love to hear you just share about that process and just, how long it takes to build this set design and costume as well. I mean, it's all these things that add into the performance that, people like myself see the shining lights in the big fancy buildings that you guys make and the carts or whatever rolls around. Like I smile and get enjoyment out of that because I don't understand the intricacies of how someone could dance on stage and through your eyes and all the professional eyes would like destroy it and make a bunch of mistakes. I think it was amazing because of my lack of knowledge, right? So all of this stuff goes into a performance to making people enjoy the experience that's outside of the performance. It's the set design, the costumes. Would love to just share some insight into that.
Well, it's a 2-year process, and on the surface, I can tell you I have never done anything like that before, and I don't mean on that scale. I mean, I've never built anything from start to finish. I've never had designers do costumes based on a vision that I had, or, it's always been the dance, the music, and then we buy the costumes and figure out how to throw something together on a dime, because that's the life of a nonprofit, right? But this was a 2-year process, and we had a budget for me to create a design team. And if there's one thing that I know as a leader, that is that you have to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. And that's how I built my design team. I needed people that I trusted. I needed people that knew more than I did, if this was going to work. So I had a lighting designer, Trad Burns, who was also a project manager, and he was so fantastic in helping guide me through this process, and also his design for the lights really walked the audience through the story. It's magical how he lights a ballet. And Holly Hines, who did the costumes, I knew that she was the top of her field, one of the most sought after costume designers in the country. And so I just cold emailed her one day, asked if she remembered me, and asked if she would participate in my new Nutcracker, and she said yes. And then they both recommended this scenic designer who also has done some really big things. And we had our team, and we locked ourselves into a room for several days and started from scratch. What is the Nutcracker about? What does it mean to the audience? What story do we want to tell? Why is it a tradition? Why is it as big as it is in this country? And what can we do to not mess that up? But give it an innovative spin. And, when you're in a room full of geniuses in their field, all I did was just talk and explore ideas and give them thoughts, and they would come back with snacks of pictures and information and things, and we just kind of built brick by brick this thing, and because of they're so high caliber, they knew all of these makers that were high caliber. For example, some of the people who made a group that made some of our costumes, Eric Winterling in New York City. This shop is also the same shop that did Wicked on Broadway, or Lion King, or some of the world's largest productions. And so we were not in little leagues anymore. We were playing with the big ones, which was intimidating but also exciting. And for me, the scary part was, can I live up to all of this investment from these heavy hitters, these people who are top in their field? Can I live up for my dancers? Are the dancers going to be happy with the product? Are they happy with the process? I think the good thing about it is there's no time to second guess. Like I talked about, when you walk out on stage, you have no choice. You got to do it. And there was no time for me to second guess or worry. I just had to put one foot in front of the other. And I always tell myself, if you have to climb a mountain, the best thing to do is to look down at your feet and look at the step you're taking in front of you. Because if you look at the mountain, it becomes overwhelming a little bit. And so we just walked forward until we got to opening night, and then the closing performance, and the curtain went down, and there's sort of a sigh of relief, and you've kind of gone into a coma at this point. You're like, you don't know if you should celebrate or still be in the the high adrenaline state.
Yeah.
But everybody just kind of, the dancers just fall on the floor, and they're like, oh my gosh, we did it. And I think it's something really worthy of celebrating, and I owe that to the organization and the people that I have around me, the dancers and the team of designers that I built, and the community for supporting it. Because I will say, it is not just good for Oklahoma, it is good for Nutcracker everywhere else in the country.
Yeah, it was. I was like, it was, you know, I really enjoyed myself. And I also kind of I saw Peter Pan as well, and also kind of enjoyed that there's, you know, people might think of ballet as super serious, and it is to a certain extent, but there's humor that you add in. Like, I think of Peter Pan, and I think of whoever was in that dog out costume.
Right.
I probably laughed way too loud when that came out, but it was just like, there's little bits of humor, right, that like lighten it up a little bit, and I think that really all plays in. Couple more questions. I'm in the real estate space, and so I love to ask my guests, if you were to build your dream house, what is your dream house? Which is kind of a tough question because there's a lot that goes into it, but non-negotiables in your dream house if you were to get the option to build your dream house today.
This is an amazing question because I think about it a lot.
Love that. You're the first guest that said that.
I do, because so I have fairly severe ADHD, and in the 90s, they weren't diagnosing you with that unless you were bouncing off the wall. And I wasn't. I just had, my grandfather used to call me absent-minded because I would use his tools and then leave them right where I dropped them and go on to the next thing. And only when I got into this role, I actually went to see a doctor, and I was like, I need help. There are people who are counting on me, and I have to be able to focus. So I need a space in the house. I have one space in this house where that is my space, where I can focus, where I can create a Zen atmosphere to relax or really dig into work, focus, to create ideas. A space that's kind of my world. It's my piece. The outdoor space. I love a really great outdoors. I like to barbecue. I like a nice pool and some greenery. I growing up in Maine, everything is green and thick, and so the pool, the I don't want to call it it's not a man cave. It's more like a den, or more of a gentleman's man cave, is how I see it in my head. And then the kitchen. The kitchen's important. The space to cook, the space to relax. I love when I cook to put on Chet Baker. I love to play some Chet Baker, open a bottle of wine, slice up some Manchego cheese, and snack while I cook to this music. And that's, a lot of people find cooking maybe stressful, but when I come home from work, that's what I want to do to relax and kind of recenter myself.
Cooking's its own dance, right? It's its own form of performing, right? Like when you describe it like that, with going into your process. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of people that know you really well that have got to see you just sit there and sit back and watch you, cook, right? Like, yeah. To some that sounds like watching paint dry, but to others it sounds like, no, I see someone in their passion and their craft, and they're totally, in a world of their own, mm-hmm. and peaceful.
It is. It is peaceful. It's, for me, that's like yoga.
Yeah.
I can deep breathe while I cook, and there's such an intense focus too that I have to have, where I'm sort of experimenting and playing, but really you have to pay attention to all of the stuff. And with ADHD, hyperfocus is like, that's what we're good at. So.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time. How people listening, how can people get involved? We have Swan Lake coming up in February. Where can people go to learn that? And then if people just feel compelled by your story and want to reach out, how do people find you?
Well, they can find us on OKCBallet.org. On our website, all of the information about the organization is there. I would just encourage people to get into some performances. And if you feel like you can't get into the Civic Center, if getting tickets is an issue, or we have other avenues for accessibility, but get in to see some dance, because there is something that everyone will love. Maybe Swan Lake isn't your flavor, but in May we have a performance where the dancers are performing to the Flaming Lips. And so ballet can pair really nicely with some rock and roll too. And if none of that is appealing, come to Ballet Under the Stars in September. We do this public performance at Scissortail Park, and it is a buffet of different kinds of dance, and it is a sea of people, 5,000 people sitting on that lawn with coolers and blankets and their families, and kids are up dancing, and get some clubbies. If you're a golfer, get some clubbies, get a cooler, get your blanket, come in and watch Ballet Under the Stars. Bring your family. We try to have something for everybody, and I one thing I can promise, having been in this field for as long as I have, is that dance is for everybody.
Yeah, awesome. Well, mate, I really appreciate your time. Glad that you're here. I'm excited to see more shows, and September Sound Under the Stars sounds pretty good in Oklahoma. So yeah, especially down at Sisdale Park. For people listening, I'll put the link to the website down in the description, and we will catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.